So I think let's kick things off. Welcome again, everyone. There's a slight change of the agenda, so I'll walk it through shortly before we get into the meat of it. So the first half approximately is going to be a short introduction to how LLMs function. If you're already familiar, that's just gonna be a short part of it. But it's a good preamble for what comes next, which is 5 use cases that we're going to talk through. And 2 of those are things that do work, 2 are things that sort of maybe works, jury's still out, and then the third one is one that doesn't really work. So we'll talk through them all, and why they work, why they don't work so well. And then those are going to be about 5 minutes each, so that first half is about half an hour. And then we were meant to have breakout rooms, but some technical issues with Zoom makes those not work when people are joining from browser, and we couldn't ensure in a way that everyone was calling in from the app. So we're going to skip those breakout rooms. So from the presentation, we're going straight into Q&A, and we already have, I think we had 40 or so pre-submitted questions. So there's a lot of interesting ones in there. But as Daniel said, really appreciate any sort of live feedback, anything you might have on your mind already now, or things that comes to mind as we go through the use cases or other questions. And at least on the app, there is a Q&A button with a question mark icon in sort of at the bottom bar. For me, it hides when I'm not moving my cursors, sort of my mouse. So you might need to do that if you're on the browser. I don't really know how it looks, but yeah, you should be able to submit questions there as well. So that's the agenda. And briefly, few of you probably know me already. I'm the CEO of Limina. I have actually quite technical background in statistics, and then have been on both the buy side and sell side, and then been running Limina now for past decade, and get to use AI quite a bit, both in my work, in advisory I do, and also, of course, watching what my colleagues and our clients do ask for, and I think maybe most interestingly here, what we are evaluating as part of the product. With that, over to you, Daniel.
Yes, and I'll kick it off basically. So I'm Daniel, I'm the CEO of Njorda. My background is in previously trading system, worked for SunGard and Fronterina, etc. But the last couple of years, we have been more focusing on the retail side and also heavy users of AI. So I got the mission of starting off with a 5-minute crash course on how AI works, which is quite a challenge. So I'll try to cover that in some form. And after that, we'll go back to use cases. But I see we're now at 40 people, so let's get started. So how an AI works. And in this context, an AI, think about ChatGPT. We're talking large language models, generative AI, so not classical deep learning. And let's start with what it actually does. So an AI, it doesn't actually just write a big text, it predicts words. So given an input text, like a starting prompt, like write me a poem about Paris, it predicts the next word in that. And then you put the whole text back with that word and it predicts the next word. So it's doing it really step by step. And one note here, on AI, you're going to hear the word token a lot. It isn't exactly words. It actually works with tokens. In most cases, a word is a token. But the important thing is tokens can also be used to represent images and sound, etc. So the same techniques are applicable not only to pure text, but also to multimodal. So in ChatGPT, you can give it a picture of something and ask what it is. So this applies to more than just text. Now then, how you kind of build an AI, how it works. It's actually 3 simple steps. You start with a large amount of relevant data, relevant text. So typically most of the public internet, plus a lot of books. And here there's a big choice about selecting the right data, quality data, removing bad content, etc. So there's a lot of work on producing good training data. Then you train a large neural network to predict the next token on this text mass. We'll cover that on the next slide. And finally, an important step is that you have humans or more powerful AI give feedback on it. This is a step where you train it to, it's called reinforcement learning. So you give it, it creates answers and you rate them as good or bad. And this is to give it more personality. So you'll note that the Claude AI has a different personality from Gemini, has a different personality from ChatGPT. And you also train it to avoid, helping people build bombs, safety, etc. So it's not a pure data training exercise. There's also this final step where you're shaping the AI. And this is how all the big AI companies work. Now, the neural network, this is the kind of most exciting part, and also where the magic happens. So this is a very schematic thing, but it's a really cool site where you can go in and see how it works, visualizing transformers. But basically, on the left side, you got the input. So here is a short text. Today, the sky is. Each of those words becomes a token. They go into the network. The network is a lot of like weights that take inputs and determine how important they are. And through about, for a large model, over 100 billion of these kind of nodes, you get an output. And the output is actually not the next word. The output for LLM is a probability distribution across all possible words. So it says with a 43% probability, blue is the next word. But today the sky is blue. Sure, that makes sense. Could also be today the sky is falling. And this is important because here's where the randomness comes in. If you notice, if you give the same question to an LLM, you'll get different answers. And that's because they don't always pick the most probable words. They sample down a bit. If you just pick the most probable word, it's going to be super boring, predictable, and actually not very useful. So this is kind of the neural network part. And to summarize this for the people that did math back at university, what we're actually doing here is optimization. So a neural network is simply a large mathematical equation with about 100 billion variables that's optimized across 1 trillion inputs or something like that. And the insanity of these numbers is what makes it actually work. I did some back of envelope math. It's like if you imagine the whole Wikipedia, like every text in the Wikipedia, and that was just one math formula, it's like 15 of those. So 15 Wikipedias, huge formula. And for every word the AI puts out to you, it has to solve that whole equation. And to train it, you have 100 billion variables that you can adjust to kind of make it optimal across all the text on the internet. And of course, that sounds ridiculous and impossible. And having the compute to actually do that is where the magic comes from. And now getting back to the magic. So some people reacted that, it's just a stochastic parrot, kind of a fun phrase. It's saying it's just giving back what you train it with. So it's not really doing anything. It's just looking at the data you fed it and you're getting it back to you. It can't create, it can't think, etc. It doesn't have a soul. And I'm going to leave the soul part off, like for philosophers. We're not going to get into there. But I think it is a good question if it can actually reason or do something creative. And this is still being debated. What we can say is regarding AIs, they're very good at summarization, brainstorming, imitating style. You can tell it to write a hip hop lyrics in a certain style, it'll do it well. Writing code, very, very good. These are called emergent behaviors. So nobody has programmed it to write code or to like draw pictures. It's just an effect of being trained on that much data. And this optimization, like 100 billion dimensional surface being optimized across all the data. And this stuff just emerges from there. So for the reasoning part, it can solve riddles it's never seen. It can write code for problems that aren't on the internet. So at least it's simulating reasoning. So for all practical purposes, yes, it does work for reasoning. I'll finish up with a couple of notes. Like I often see misconceptions. These are like common pitfalls or misunderstanding. The model has no memory. So an LLM model is a stateless black box, doesn't remember anything. It is non-deterministic. That means different answers to the same question. It doesn't learn or evolve. It's not like growing on us. Can't surf the web, can't take any actions. The model is just a matrix of numbers. All of these things are added on by layers around it, which we'll look a bit at today. So if you see ChatGPT surfing or having memory, it's actually not the AI model. It's more just regular Python code or something around there that's remembering things and putting them back in. And that was it. That was a 5-minute AI quick start. And I'll pass it back to Christopher for the first use case.
Thanks, Daniel. And we're going to plot the 5 use cases out on this graph. So this is going to come back 5 times throughout the next 20 minutes or so. So on the y-axis from top to bottom or bottom to top is how valuable the use case is for users. So is it, for example, if the use case is to save time, is it saving a lot of time, goes high? Is it saving just a little bit of time, goes low? And then the x-axis is essentially how well, so from left to right is how stable is it? So does it do the job we're asking very well, goes to the right? Does it not do it, or does it make mistakes that, given the use case, we can't tolerate? It goes to the left. So ideal world is up and to the right, and that's where we'll start today. We're going to start with the most boring use case, probably, but there's a reason why it's boring. Because it is highly valuable and it works relatively well. So I'm sure a lot of you will recognize this one. If you click, does it show, Daniel? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So extracting data from PDFs. So a PDF is already to some degree structured data. A computer can read it, but it doesn't follow a specified format. It can usually change the source of the PDF. So it is still very cumbersome to write normal code to extract data from PDFs, even if it's technically possible. And also, like, PDFs tend to change without a change management mechanism, so that process can't really be trusted. But LLMs do a great job of extracting data from PDFs. So if you take a very concrete example, a trade confirmation PDF that might contain a price, execution date, and a couple of things like that we might want to parse and put into a system. And we might have a lot of counterparties, so these PDFs they look differently every time. But they're all going to contain a price and a date. And those might be called different things, those fields. But we can give some examples, and then the LLM will guess. If it doesn't exist, guess another one. And there are it's almost all the way to the right here. It still can mix up dates, for example. So the 2nd of February, like the order of those, the 2 and the 2, well, in that case, it doesn't matter, but the 3rd of February, the order of those, is it the 3rd of February or is it the 2nd of March? So it can make those mistakes, but humans can as well. But if it's not fully clear from that data. Right. Second use case, and back to you, Daniel.
Right. Thank you. So for context, I'll just introduce what we're doing. So all my examples are from the Njorda app. The audience is like interested retail investors in Sweden, people with some pension, savings, etc. The goal is we're trying to help people manage savings and pensions better. And we do that by aggregating all their investments and then analyze and provide insights. And that's, of course, where the AI comes in. So we've been developing this quite heavily. First use case is a no-brainer. It's doing Q&A on my investments. So letting retail users chat with an AI to get help with investing. And the goals here are, of course, to help them. But the secondary goal is to be better than ChatGPT. If you can get the same answers by a free service on the internet, we have no right to exist. So that's our primary goal here. And I think an interesting note for everybody just on this concept of AI and retail investors, Finansinspektionen did a big survey, that's the Swedish regulators this year, asked 1,000 people. And 15% of Swedes already using AI for investing advice. And about the younger audience, 20 to 29-year-olds, 30% or 29% are using AI for investing advice. So it is really worthwhile making sure the AIs give good advice, because the genie's out of the bottle already. Okay, so the solution here, we basically took an AI, typical model from the main providers. We collect all the account data using various aggregators. We'll give it access to quality market data, so Morningstar data. One big problem is the ChatGPT will go surf the internet, find random data, and it won't be that good. And then we'll give it access to portfolio analytics tools. And this is kind of a general model. When you're building an AI for use case, you want to provide it with data and then tools. The reason for giving it tools is LLMs are bad at math, so they need some help there. So we give it a risk engine, etc. And basically, you can think of this like a human. If a financial advisor was going to do this, they would need access to the client's portfolio, data, and tools. So it's kind of the same model you can use for the AI. And then we let the users loose to just go crazy and chat with it. And initial results, I would say, are quite good. Users really engage well with AI. They understand it, they get it, it's out there. So it's not something unusual for them. We had fairly simple guardrails to prevent giving advice. We're not regulated. We want to provide more insights. They're quite effective, but they're not bulletproof. So you can always trick an AI telling it to ignore previous instructions and tell me what stock is going to go up. So terms and conditions are important. You need to make clear what the AI is for and how far you can trust it. And Finansinspektionen was quite helpful in guidance here, which they've gone out with to the public. An unexpected big unlock in this model is that it unlocks advanced tools for users. So like a scenario tool would be hard for most people to use or understand. But somebody who asks AI, if COVID happens again, how would I do? Then the AI can take the responsibility of running those scenarios and then presenting it in an easy to understand form. So rating it, the value is clearly high. It bridges a financial literacy gap. It gives users access to better functionality, makes it easier to use. It's a good UI experience, which people engage with. And it actually works pretty well. Real users, get help. The main problem we found was actually where we were trying to make it more, compliant and less advisory, and people wanted advice. So they're asking it, what stock should I buy? And it comes back, no, I can't really tell you that, but here's some general guidelines. And then people were frustrated. So to wrap up, I will put this on the diagram there. It should probably be overlapping the PDFs a bit, but we didn't want to overlap them. Works quite well, but not as well as PDFs, of course, and it's pretty high value. And back to Christopher for the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. And more people are joining, actually. Maybe they knew that the first use case wouldn't be the most interesting one. Good. Now let's do a use case that doesn't work so well, which is rebalancing of my portfolio. So for this, I'll do a very quick demo. So if you want to let me take the steering wheel, Daniel, for a second.
I will. You can share, I think. Multiple panelists can share. And maybe I can stop sharing. I'll stop sharing for now.
Right. So I'm hopefully now sharing the system screen. And this is just to paint an example of how, for example, a rebalancing of a portfolio could happen without AI. So let's say we have a portfolio here and we want to rebalance that against a model, allocate almost all my, almost fully, leave 0.2%, and don't change my holding in Activision. Okay. That was, depending on how you count, 2 or 4 clicks. So very deterministic and quite fast to execute. And I know exactly what happened. I can see which portfolio I had, etc. Now, this could be replaced with a prompt window where I'm actually asking the system to rebalance my portfolio. This portfolio target 99.8% exposure. Don't change the holding in this position. So there is a challenge there with the randomness of the LLM that I wanted, this is a very precise operation. So I want what I want to happen. I want exactly that to happen. I don't want randomness. I want the boring deterministic process here. The other part of this specific process is that that first part can to some degree be overcome. And we'll talk about that actually in the last use case. But the other part here is writing that prompt is actually slower than going in and doing the workflow, assuming that I know the user interface and the user experience of the system. If I have to put learning the system into like the task here, it's going to take longer. But if I'm already familiar with the system, it is faster. And we have done some tests on that, and the difference is we're still talking seconds, but this could be workflows that gets done a lot. So seconds times a lot, but it's still faster to do it programmatically than to do it with AI. So maybe this will change to some degree, but for now, it's not really adding value, or in a way, we can't find a way to make this better with AI than without, essentially. And there is a great question which is related that we'll get to in the Q&A, which is essentially, but what if I have things that are spanning multiple systems? We'll get to that early in the Q&A section. And with that, back to Daniel for use case 4.
Sure, and then I'll do the sharing again. There we go. Okay, so the next use case is similar, but importantly different in several ways. We want to provide insights. So given a user's investments portfolio, we want to produce helpful and interesting insights. This should be something that a good advisor would do if you came to them and had a meeting and a coffee. There's, oh, this is interesting. Have you seen the market do this? And you're kind of off balance here. And the first approach was to start with what we had on the Q&A. So exactly the same setup. We have the user's data, we have tools, we have market data, and we just tell the AI, hey, make a list of portfolio insights. And yeah, given the theme that we had use cases that work and don't work, you can guess that this one did not work that well. The AI will always give you stuff, so it gives you insights. And this, I don't expect you to read this, but it's an example. Of course, we tested it by asking it several times to do the same thing. That's, by the way, a very good way of just evaluating AI solutions. Give it the same thing 10 times and see if it has a stable solution or if it's sometimes right or sometimes wrong. So like a bit of statistic testing is very good. What we saw on this just make insights for me is sometimes we'd get the same one. So global diversification did turn up often, but other times it would be totally random. Stuff would come in, stuff would come out. And we had very little control over the type of insights. And also the biggest gap was lack of ranking. It didn't make sense what it was putting at the top. So we evaluated this and why and came to some conclusions. So the AI is very good at generating ideas. It's very good at doing them in the style we want. So we can say, make a short insight suitable for mobile and make a longer description for when the user clicks on it. Works super well. The weakness is in judging relevance. If you just tell it to put important insights at the top, it doesn't do that well, simply. There might be like a small stock or a stock where I have a tiny, tiny position that does something and it'll put that at the top because it's a big move, but it doesn't have any financial impact on me. So we needed to be much more, have an opinion and provide guidance in what's interesting here. And here we got into the buzzword of this year and a bit of last year. So agentic AI, the concept that you can build AI agents. So we went for specialized agents. So one thing that generates market insights, just look at market moves, how that's impacted, picks interesting things. One thing that looks at my portfolio balance aspects, like if I'm heavy in stocks or overbalanced towards the US or something. One agent that looks at my goals, how I'm tracking them, if anything's happening there. And then we have a global judge. This is kind of quite a common pattern, a judge AI that takes all the insights from all these like analysts and then ranks them. And to rank them, we give it specific instructions like, look at financial impact, novelty, make sure to pick some of each kind, etc. So then we can specify what's important and what kind of mix we have. So we need to take a much more advanced approach for this. And it was better, but getting back to how we evaluate this, I would say the value of this use case is very high. The reason is that getting timely actionable insights where you don't have to do anything, they just pop up, is of course hugely valuable. It moves the app from being passive to active. It's very engaging, and it's actually what users want. They want more like us, tell me something, tell me what to do, tell me something interesting, as opposed to give me a big dashboard and dig around in. Very few people ask for big dashboards and a lot of data. They ask for more like good insights or good actions. But it works so far unreliably. If you want to stay away from giving advice, you kind of offer up actionability. And there's still, even with agent approach, there's still a bit hit and miss. So it's an active research area. I think this is a very, very challenging problem that we're still working on. But it's a hard one. So if you get into this area, be aware that this is much more heavy lifting than the general Q&A. And with that said, I'll plot it into our diagram here. I'm putting it as very valuable and pretty unstable. So up in that quadrant, worth working on, but not ready for prime time. On that note, back to Christopher.
Thanks, Daniel. I think one thing worth noting as well on that use case, in case everyone isn't aware, is that when systems communicate with LLMs, they can get more than text back. It's possible to force the LLM to answer with structured data, such as numbers, true, false, etc. Okay, over to use case number 5, which is a little bit relating to the third one. It is user interface replacement. So the third one was basically us saying it doesn't make sense to replace the user interface in this case. This is a more generic idea, which is essentially instead of communicating via clicks in the system, you communicate via text. And a more valuable use case here is, for example, generating reports. So for a system that can generate reports, most of the time, that's not an application that is used multiple times per day, which is typically like the rebalancer is usually used at least a few times per week, sometimes multiple times per day, while a report manager might be used for a specific report 2 times per year. Okay, so how did I do this again? And there are like 50 different fields to fill out to get that data out. So this is essentially replacing those fields with a prompt window. So you're asking, I'd like a report that does this. And then the LLM will probably return with a few follow-up questions. I'm missing this and that information. Shall I make these assumptions? Yes or no? And then you'll get that report. Now, this has been plotted higher on the works well than the rebalance portfolio. And the reason is, in this case, we're assuming that the system is still doing the actual logic. So a developer or engineer has actually coded exactly how that report gets produced. It's tested, and that code gets executed. It's not the LLM trying to do math on the fly or make up how that report should be done. It doesn't excel at creating ad hoc JIPS compliant performance calculations. So someone needs to actually still implement and do that well, and then the LLM will translate like a request to an API call, essentially, to the backend that does the logic and returns still the same the same report that it did before. You just don't need to fill out those 50 parameters, which is why it works more well. It is somewhere in the middle of how valuable it is, because this is the more complex the user interface, the more fields, etc., and the the less frequently that workflow is performed, the more value it has, because if you don't know the user interface, you don't have to learn it. You can use this instead. But then on the other hand, then it's not that as valuable because you're not doing it often. So that's why those are sort of pulling the use case value in two different directions, and it ends up somewhere in the middle in the end. Right. I think that concludes the use cases.
I think we're done.
Yeah.
So we got one raised hand and a couple of questions come in.
Yeah. Becky, help us out here. What do we do with the raised hand? Okay, well, I don't know if Becky is around. Let's start with the questions in the meantime and let Becky figure that out. Let's start with one of the questions here. There's a question around using LLMs. Here we go. Per is in the meeting.
And he is muted. So Per, if you unmute, you should be able to talk.
Well, we'll see.
Maybe we just grab a question while he's figuring that out.
Yeah, sounds good.
I saw one here. Sorry, did you have one or?
No, go ahead.
So first question was specifically for the Q&A on my investments use case. Do you see this being relevant across asset classes or primarily for equities, given the relative simplicity of equities versus fixed income derivatives, etc.? Definitely see it as being cross-asset in the sense that to do diversification, you definitely want to mix assets. In our case, we're looking at retail, so derivatives are generally not in the picture here, and other parts are going to be fairly simple products. So short answer is yes, cross-asset, but without getting into all the complexity of everything. And Per Inningsberg is now unmuted and talk permitted, so we'll see if it works.
I'll pick one in the meantime,
Yeah.
which is on the UI replacement use case, whether or not text or voice is sort of to be preferable if moving voice to text sort of improves that use case. We actually haven't tested that. If you look at the vast majority of uses of these tools, it is definitely the one that's most common is text. Second is actually graphics, images, and voice comes after that. Now, this is a very niche use case, so it might well be that people prefer voice, but I think it's going to be in the end up to personal preference. So what the LLM basically does is it still needs to convert the voice into text, and then the text is processed as a normal text prompt. So it's sort of two steps instead of one. So it's adding an additional layer before. And if users have a preference for that, we'll definitely uncover that. It's an interesting idea, definitely.
Okay, I want to give Per another chance here, or otherwise I'll grab the question. There is some kind of curse over Per Inningsberg's audio there. Okay, I'll grab one, which was really interesting use case, and then they clarified that it was number 4, the insights. So insights on portfolio. How does this compare to how humans do this today, which is a bit hit and miss? Is there any advantage? I think that's a really good question. So Generally aiming for like a perfect solution it's a bit like self-driving cars. Should a car never have an accident and be perfect, then you're never going to get self-driving cars. Is it okay if they're better than humans? Probably. For this case, yes. I mean, humans looking at portfolio insights, they will also be hit and miss, and in some cases they will also be incentivized to like sell funds for that particular bank or something, so they may even be biased, which is a major factor. I would say the positive comparison, if you get it right using agents, is first off, they can do it daily. So instead of having one review per year, which is nice, but things happen over a year, this thing can run daily. It can give you fresh insights when things happen, so you don't have to wait to like the end of the year to hear about them. You can customize them a lot more, so you can give feedback on what you're interested in, so they can be more personalized to your tastes and what you find interesting. And of course, they can be much more thorough. An advisor could spend a couple of minutes at it at best, while AI agent can spend enormous resources on it and do a much deeper job. So if you get it, to not do crazy stuff, it can be a much better solution. And above all, accessible at a cost, not like 1,000, 1,500 kroner for a meeting. You can get like quality insights daily. So I think it's a much better solution in the long term for like basic insights.
Thanks, Daniel. And then we have one which is basically is the difference between adopting systems that have embedded AI capabilities versus like putting a AI layer on top of multiple systems. And I think this probably relates more to enterprise software for investment managers like OMS, some accounting system maybe. So should those have their own native AI capabilities, or should it be like an overarching AI that sort of can pull data and orchestrate them? And I think if the latter to some degree can be achieved, it's like a simpler system. It abstracts away all of the problems with legacy technology, etc. Now, I think we're very far from being able to do that in practice, because a lot of the challenges with these fragmented systems to begin with is they don't really talk to each other. It's hard to, some of them don't even have APIs. It's really hard to talk with them without having like deployed software and then users logging into them, which means an AI wouldn't, that the AI can't solve those problems. So like realistically, I think it's more likely that we'll see the sort of front to back trend in the market still continue, but then layering on the expectation that those systems do have a lot of AI capabilities and potentially making like separate standalone data management solutions obsolete and merging that into the front to back system, because then all data is there and controlled in the same system that the AI can talk to. Probably more of an opinion from me than an actual research behind it. But yeah, there you go. I don't know, Daniel, if you have views on that or if you want to grab another one.
I think that was a good summary. I think we actually discussed this one a bit before. We both found it an interesting question, so we're pretty synced up on that one. I'll grab a question, and then I'll toss it out there. If anybody else wants to try to raise their hand and talk, we can definitely mix it up a bit, even though it didn't work for Per. But I got follow-ups here. I think the portfolio insights was I got two there. Let's see if we can put those together. So portfolio insights, is this scraping news, research to provide insights, or is it looking at things like attribution, news risk, analytics, etc., to help explain performance, underperformance, general market trends? And then the second question, does portfolio insights also mean to give advice to better approach of diversification in the rebalancing process, not to worry portfolio managers about losing their jobs? So I brushed over a bit what it was. So what we're doing now is we're looking at not news, but just like history, P&L attribution, risk allocations, asset class allocations, and feeding all of that in. We would very much like to do news. I can reveal that we did like extensive user interviews, so like deep interviews with about 30 people. And a common topic that came up that surprised us was people want to understand how news affects their investments. So a trigger for them to log into their account and check their stuff is big news items. And when they see a big drop on a stock or something, they want to understand what's driving that. So we haven't done that. I think that's next area to tie in there. But so far, we're doing a more analytical numbers approach to it. And I don't think portfolio managers need to be worried quite yet. But I will say the tricky thing is, of course, saying what's the right thing. Like saying, when should you rebalance? You have to have a kind of a balanced target there. So there is the part about actually setting the strategy, which is out of scope so far. Good. I think that covers it for that part. I don't see any raised hands or anything, so I will pass back to Christopher.
Yeah, I can do one. So have two questions that I think maybe it's possible to answer in sort of one go. So what AI sort of can be trained on, and whether or not it can handle sort of hard rules like cutoffs. Does it know, for example, only surface things in June and things like that? So that is absolutely possible to do, especially with these things that are like around the AI. So to Daniel's intro, the LLM it's trained on data, and then it becomes a box that never changes until a new model is released, which is trained on new data. So when a model is released, it doesn't know anything that happens afterwards, but it can happen. It can know things that happened before it. So training in like an existing model is, I think training is not the right word. So I'll show a brief example of something that we have done on our side. You can go in and play with this if you want. So if you go to our website, there is a little person icon here, which actually brings you to a chat when we can ask a AI clone of me. You can speak to it, right? So so we have quote unquote trained this AI, but the way that's done is it is still a locked old model. And when you type something here, it goes into the database of everything that I've ever written, blogs, LinkedIn posts, videos, etc. And it pulls out the relevant information and it injects it into the prompt before the question that I'm asking here. So if there is something related to how I felt, it will probably find it injected in the prompt before it's answering here. So I think that sort of answers some of those questions. So when it does a search with a hard cutoff date, it can do that new search and look at the dates. It is a little bit tricky to do, but it is possible.
Brilliant. I spotted a good question coming in here, so I'll pick that up. And I'll also just, to make this a bit more two-way, encourage people to, if you've seen any other use cases you'd like to bring up or comment on, post them to the chat or anything similar to what we've done. Feel free to bring them up. It's interesting to hear. The question I saw was, I'm curious as to how much portfolio data was used in training the models and how this affects the result. And the short answer is we have done no training at all. So we basically use off-the-shelf models, and we will only train them as kind of a last resort. So what we do is we tried two things. First, we did pretty much what Christopher described, that we inject data into the prompt. So before you talk to the AI, we just give it a lot of data, like here's a user, here's their accounts, here's what's happened the last week. So give it a lot of data. And then it has all of this and it can make use of that. So it's not trained on it, it just receives the data. That works pretty well. The problem is if you give an AI data, it'll try to use it. It'll think like, oh, this is important, so I should answer with this. We found the better approach was to give the AI a set of tools. So we give it tools, it's like functions the AI can call, a bit like ChatGPT can go off and get a web page. In our case, it can go off and do a P&L report, it can do a risk scenario, it can retrieve all your accounts. So the the AI has full access to data, but it's not trained on it. And then when you ask it something, it'll figure out like, like if you ask it what's been happening lately, oh, I need to pull like P&L numbers 1 month back. I need to look at this. It'll do those, gets that data, and then it answers. So basically all the data is served to it on the fly. And that's first off computationally better instead of pre-calculating the universe and giving it to it. It allows it to do things on the fly, like you can't give it all possible scenarios ahead of time. And it also makes it less confused because if you feed the data, like I was trying Christopher's robot a bit, and you can see that it's trained on the LinkedIn, and it'll like toss stuff in a bit like randomly, even some like more private posts there turn up. So you see it's really trying to use the data quite a bit. So that's the answer for that one. Very good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question on the use case, which was the most cost effective. So I think that comes back to the most boring one, like the PDF use case. That is like it is really easy to get things like that to work. It doesn't require a lot of um, a lot to get it working, to be honest. And it doesn't need another benefit. It doesn't really need training data either, which is a big benefit in this industry because we don't want to share our data for training purposes. And that's a very sound stance, but it also limits like what training can be done on domain specific data. This one doesn't really require that either. So that one definitely on this use case.
Yeah, totally agree. I kind of joked about this question before because it's such a hard one. Future trends, what's on the horizon? So what do you see upcoming? And I'll give it a go. So, the standard answer is everything we see now is the worst it's ever going to be. So the level AI is at now, it's the worst you're ever going to see. It's just going to get better. So that's kind of a no-brainer. So you're going to need to do less and less training and specialized stuff. You're going to be able to just dump more data in and get like good answers. That's kind of a no-brainer. On the more side technical, I think you're seeing it more in consumer space, but it's called like browser use or tool use and computer use. So letting the AI actually control the computer or control a browser. Mainly sort of like personal productivity, but it's kind of a game changer because it will let the AI kind of log into any system and use it as a user, and it eliminates the need for integration. So even if you got legacy systems, you can automate any kind of manual flows there. So that should be a really big one if you can do it in a nice, safe way. So you don't have to wait for somebody to build an integration, and you don't have to wait for them to put AI features into their systems. You just give the AI access to that program and show it with a couple of screenshots, what to do, and then off it goes, and it can, book in trades or pull reports or whatever, and automate any kind of human work in there. So I think that's coming first in the consumer space, but it will definitely impact any kind of like legacy integration work. Christopher, you got any like future views?
Well, maybe I'll start with a past view. Like we really seen in the past, yeah, and if you don't play with these tools on a daily basis, this might have gone unnoticed. But about 3-ish months ago, there's been a huge increase in like the quality, how good the LLMs are. So if you tried use cases last year, they might magically work now. There's been a massive leap just in the last, I'd say, 3-ish months across most models, even the ones that don't have reasoning, and across like the capabilities they have around the model, but also in how they're able to articulate the answers, and they are very, very human now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I saw another question as well, which is not in the Q&A, but in the chat. So how and a concrete example, how complicated would it be to set up an LLM that extracts investor reports, analyst reports, and keep that model up to date with market insights and trends? And I think this ties back a little bit. I'd love to get your view as well, Daniel. Like
Yeah, that's a good one.
like training, like getting quote unquote training the model is mostly about the data. So if you have access to this data, if it's publicly available online or you have a subscription to the data, getting that into it's actually a database, and then having a system like find which data is relevant for a question you're asking it, inject it into the prompt, and then answer. That's relatively straightforward. The quality of the answers you get, I guess, comes back to Daniel's use cases.
Yeah.
I don't know, Daniel, if your view is in line or if you have
Yeah, it
different.
is. This one is actually interesting because it is kind of like almost a no-brainer. Like, reading reports is like very, very manual work, and you want to do it for a lot of companies to get good corporate data. I know companies that are doing this. I talked to some people who are doing exactly this, and they're a scruffy startup with a couple of people, and I think they already got customers. So it's definitely not hard. I think this is like low-hanging fruit. In a similar vein, I know the winner of Sting, which is like a startup competition. I think the last batch was a company that does competitor analysis. So you basically just put in a company, their website, and then it digs up them, all their competitors, finds quality data on them, and gives you like an awesome report about like, all the growth metrics, all the cash flows, everything. Reading data from a ton of different sources, parsing all the reports. So I see Michael Barakat was there, yeah. So yeah, for doing this kind of analyst work, it's fairly easy.
Even actually the generic models nowadays do this relatively well if you enable search and you want like a competitor analysis. They will do it surprisingly well. Information that is barely possible to find yourself online, they'll find it and
Yeah.
they'll put together a quite good comparison. I think what's good to keep in mind, it gets biased towards large brands always when doing
Mm-hmm.
that. So if you know that there are like smaller, lesser known brands, mention those specifically to have those included.
I'll note one thing there. The keyword that Barakat said is regularly extract reports and keep up to date. The tricky thing is often finding diffs. So like, something has happened. So doing a big search is nice, but then being alerted when something changes, like, this company just lowered their earnings or whatever, that is harder. So if you easy to get a lot of data from the LLM and then finding diffs and triggering interesting events, that's more work. I haven't seen that done very well yet.
I've seen that work, but not in real time. So I've seen
Yeah.
it work on like a daily basis, but it's too late usually in the
Yeah.
markets, obviously, if you you find it a day late. But lesser pronounced trends, that's definitely possible on a sort of daily basis. Well, we have a lot more than we can get through in the last 5.
Yeah.
Do you have any question you'd like to prioritize?
How do we seek engagement from users when it comes to AI features? I think that's actually a good one. So people are already becoming AI fatigued. There's a little kind of AI button somewhere. Maybe you don't click it, or there's something pop up. So kind of delivering value and putting it in good places. So for engagement, we think the proactive part is important. That's why the insights are interesting, something that pings you like, hey, here's your weekly report, here's something interesting. So it's more active instead of you having to go in and like ask the AI, like what's happening today. And then integrating the AI with the UI, like deep integration. I didn't have it in here, but you can do simple things like take a tooltip. Like you have the application, there's some kind of weird word, net worth that somebody doesn't really know what it is. And there's a question mark, you have a little text explaining it. We added in explain with AI. So if it's parts in the system, instead of just a boring tooltip, you click the button, boom, AI opens up, explains what the concept is, and then illustrates it with examples of your own data. So like your net worth is your house and this minus the loans, and it's much more engaging. So you can sneak the AI into very like unexpected places. Also have the AI be able to control the UI. So you ask it, what are my most risky holdings? It'll open up the holdings tab and highlight them. So those kind of interactions are a good way to get engagement with the users. You shouldn't force AI down their throats, but you should also not expect them to pick up and understand exactly how it should be used the whole time. So not doing like remember the Clippy thing that Microsoft had in the office that drove everybody nuts? You don't want to go there, but you want to stay on like between that and a very passive AI. Yeah, Christopher.
Yeah, I think we have a different like user. I think when we raise the
Yeah.
question of sort of alpha features, like the first question we get back is it's off by default, right?
Yeah, different use cases.
Yeah, and yeah, not training on the day. Like all of those questions come before even like asking what can it do? Like it's not trained on my data, right? How do we ensure that it's no leakage, and how do we ensure it's turned off by default, etc. Those questions are first before even looking at okay, what is the use case? Which is again probably sound. Like I think it's wise to be a bit paranoid here. Um, Even questioning policies can make sense. I know we know that CEOs of some of these AI companies might not be known for following the rules, so that could be a consideration for sure. I think shall we round off here, and then we have all of the questions, so the ones that we haven't been able to answer we'll collect, and we'll try and get back to everyone over email, share the recording as well.
Yeah. And I'll toss out like, this is an area it's developing rapidly. We find it definitely fascinating and a lot of challenges. So if anybody has ideas or would like to just discuss stuff or just nerd out about it, feel free to ping, and happy to engage.
Yeah, likewise. And thanks a lot for all of the questions. It's been great fun, especially the second half here, answering them. And a lot of people have stayed around as well. So
Good
it
attendance.
was useful. Yeah. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.